is produced.
Mr. Bola, what is the whole idea behind the Pan-African Quality Policy?
The Pan-African Quality Policy was conceived to serve as a guide, a sort of framework for developing quality infrastructure, for ease of exchanging goods and services between nations. Certain infrastructure have to be in place, infrastructure like standards which will define the criteria to judge the products, infrastructure like laboratories that are accredited to test the product to determine their quality parameters, infrastructures like metrology to check the accuracy of measurement of instruments and products in terms of what they do, length, volume, and all of that. So such infrastructure needed to be developed for countries to exchange goods and services easily. In developing this infrastructure, it is important to have a sort of guiding principle, and that is what the Pan-African Quality Policy is about. Every nation is supposed to have a national quality policy to also serve as a guide for the development of quality infrastructure. That guide ensures that efforts are not duplicated. What already exists is not being duplicated. In such climes, you will have, if you have a laboratory already that is testing a parameter and you need to set up another one, you don't need to go setting up the same one. You can put your energy somewhere else. It also ensures that, there will be intra and interoperability. What you can use, I can also use. That saves a lot of resources. So it is for those kinds of guidance that you require a Pan-African quality policy, because the quality policy of each nation that is within the continent, if you take them one by one, might make things a bit difficult when it comes to exchange of services and goods. That also includes conformity assessment. The process through which you judge whether the products are good or are not good, whether they meet requirements or they don't. And since we're talking of free exchange of goods and services within Africa and with the rest of the world, there is a need to have a unified policy that guides the development of quality infrastructure, standardization, conformity assessment, testing, laboratories, the last one, measurement, accuracy of measurement, So it is those. And to do it in Africa, Africa is a very large continent. The African Organization for Standardization, which is the umbrella body for all standards bureaus, national standards bureaus in Africa, took the initiative following a decision by African Union, the Union of Heads of States, to ensure that Africa can move to the next level. Africa can join the rest of the world, can compete effectively in terms of products, goods, and services. So in putting to effect that decision of the African Heads of States, the African Organization for Standardization then initiated the process of development of a Pan-African quality policy. And this was broken into two. The first set were done, for Eastern and Southern Africa. That get-together, that talk show took place in Kenya. The one that took place in Nigeria was for Central Africa, North Africa, and West Africa, where experts in standardization, in conformity assessment from all of these countries came together to determine what a Pan-African quality policy should be, so that it can easily define what quality infrastructures can be done and spread across Africa. For example, we have a National Metrology Institute set up in Nigeria at Enugu. That Metrology Institute can serve the whole of West Africa. There won't be any need to go and invest huge millions of dollars again in Sebene to serve the same purpose. Those are some of the things that a quality policy defines, so that the establishment of quality infrastructure are guided by the policy.
Does that also mean, because you were talking about a quality assessment,
Yes.
does that also mean there will be a harmonized quality assessment within
That
these
is what I
goods and
meant by
services?
conformity assessment. First is that the standards that are developed in each of these nations have to be harmonized. That we had commenced over 4-5 years ago. We are harmonizing standards. Nigeria is actually leading in this direction in West Africa. We are also harmonizing standards across Africa, so that we have, for example, for traditional medicines, rather than develop Nigeria industrial standards for traditional medicines, what we are doing under the auspices of Africa Organization for Standardization is to develop African traditional medicines, so that once those standards are approved, each of the member countries can simply just adopt or adapt them. So we don't have to start developing these standards in each country. So we are all coming together as Africans to develop African traditional medicine standards, which we can all use, rather than each nation doing its own. So that's the kind of thing that the Pan-African Quality Policy is trying to define, a guidance, a structure, a framework to guide the development of quality infrastructure.
Oh, well. Now, let me ask you, how involved is Standard Organization of Nigeria, and is SON alone in ensuring Nigeria's participation in actualizing this policy?
No, we are very involved. In the first instance, we are a founding member of the African Organization for Standardization, and we have been very, very active ever since then. 2 or 3 Nigerians have been presidents of ARSO. We've had 2 Nigerians as Secretary General. And as I'm talking to you, we're a council member of African Organization for Standardization. So we are very much involved. In fact, we are spearheading the harmonization of standards in West Africa as well as in Africa. So we are very much involved. And we're not alone. Standardization is a stakeholder-driven thing. Standards development is only coordinated by SON. The actual people that develop the standards are the stakeholders who are related to that standard. The manufacturers of the products, the dealers in the products, the research institutions, the regulatory agencies, including even the media, in terms of advocacy for those things. So what SON does is to serve as a secretariat for the development of the standards, to ensure that it is done in line with international best practices, and to ensure that it can get approval for it from the Standards Council, which is the governing council of the Standards Organization of Nigeria. When all of this is done and the standards are approved, it also has the responsibility to disseminate the information, to the public, and then begin to monitor with other regulatory agencies the implementation of the standards. Because of the participation of the stakeholders, adopting the standards, using them becomes a little easier. Because if there are going to be issues, they will have raised them during the technical committee where the decisions are being taken, or where the recommendations are being made to the Standards Council.
All right. A similar summit was organized in Nairobi, Kenya,
yes.
in this regards. Yes. What were the takeaway from that forum?
The takeaway is to ensure that first, we never wanted it to be too large. I'm talking of the NSBs, National Standards Bureaus in Africa. And we wanted it to be robust enough so that the conclusions that are drawn from the meeting in Nairobi, as well as the ones that are drawn from Nigeria, will now be put together. All of this will still be shared with all the experts for comments before a Pan-African quality policy is now brought together. The approval of this will be taken to the African Union in itself, which consists the heads of states of all the nations in Africa.
Now, the policy stems from the African Union Agenda 2063.
Yes.
Could you shed more light into what the agenda seeks to achieve?
The agenda is trying to position Africa.
Other challenges it seeks to address.
Yes, the essence of the Agenda 2063 is to position Africa to be competitive with other parts of the world is to ensure that everything that is going to be done in Africa can compare favorably with every other part of the world. There are some major programs that the African Union has for the emancipation of Africa, like, for example, automation. You know, we want to ensure that once these things come to Africa, Africa can uptake and compete effectively with the rest of the world. Beyond that, African Union wants to ensure that within Africa, we do a lot more trading within ourselves to ensure that our people, you know, can develop faster. Exchange of goods and services can create more jobs and reduce unemployment and poverty within the continent.
As the name implies, Pan-African policy, quality policy,
Yes.
are all the African countries actually participating?
Yes. For example, the meeting that took place in Nigeria, we were supposed to have 27 countries. 25 were represented. So that tells you that's over 95% of the membership. Similar thing happened in Kenya. So we are all in it because there is no country that is an island on its own. And come to think of it, in terms of market, Africa is a huge market for the rest of the world. But what we are promoting is first to ensure that nations within Africa can get to trade with themselves more, create a lot more wealth, and then can compete effectively with, you know, other continents across the world.
All right, we'll continue this interesting discourse. Let's just take a short break now. This is Frontiers. We'll take a short break now. Please don't go away. Okay, back to where we stopped. This initiative is quite laudable, but I want to ask this question. What infrastructural institutions are being put in place to ensure mutually beneficial free movement of goods from guidance across national, regional, and continental borders?
Okay, let me focus on Nigeria. In terms of quality infrastructure, when you talk about provision of standards, every day we're doing that. As I'm talking to you now, you go to our offices in Lagos, in Abuja, you find technical committee meetings going on where stakeholders are discussing either they are developing new standards or they are adopting standards that already exist somewhere else, or they are adapting those standards to suit ourselves. Standards development is a major infrastructure. The process of doing it is such that we have made it faster. You don't reinvent the wheel where it already exists. So in terms of standards development, we are good in Nigeria. Then we talk about laboratories. A lot of laboratories exist, but the question is, how many of them can test products that will be acceptable in other parts of the world? So that brings you to issues of international accreditation. As at today, Standards Organization of Nigeria leads in Nigeria in terms of accredited laboratories that have international acceptance. And apart from that, we already have in place an offshore conformity assessment.
The laboratories, are they for the testing of standards?
Testing of products.
Okay.
Testing of products, because standards are the criteria for the products. The laboratories are where you are going to test to determine whether they meet those requirements or not. The process for doing all of that is what is referred to as conformity assessment. You know, the inspection, the sampling, you know, the test, the analysis, and the results, you know, before you certify the product or not. That process is what is referred to as conformity assessment. So that is also in place. And then, you know, in terms of developing this infrastructure laboratories, it's not just about government. It has to go down the line because no nation of the world has all that it requires. So apart from the government-owned laboratories like you have in Son, like NAFDAC has, like FIRU has in Oshodi, there are also private, you know, laboratories that are developing. and we are putting in place a process for their accreditation. In Nigeria today, we have what we call NINAS, Nigeria National Accreditation System, that ensures that these laboratories can be accredited, and that accreditation will be acceptable in every other part of the world, because NINAS in itself is affiliated to international organizations that are into the same process. So that's another one. We have a metrology laboratory that ensures the accuracy of measurements and systems that is already being developed in Enugu and is almost completed. That institute can serve not just Nigeria, but the whole of West Africa. So these are the infrastructure that are already being developed. The essence of a quality policy, either at the national level, or at the regional level, or at the continental level, is to ensure harmonization of all this infrastructure, is to reduce duplication of efforts, is to kind of optimize usage of all of this infrastructure. And that is what the Pan-African quality policy is all about.
Now, usually, every project normally have this or encounter some challenges at the teething stage.
Yeah.
What would you say are the challenges being confronted by this policy?
Okay, the first natural challenge is about participation, and that we have overcome. To ensure that everybody participates. I just gave you figures, out of 27 countries that we're expecting from West, Central, and North Africa, 25 were in attendance, apart from development partners who were also part of the project. So that has been overcome. The development amongst nations is usually a challenge, because each nation are not developing at the same pace. And that's why also we said a National Metrology Institute in Nigeria does not have to be replicated in Republic of Benin. What we are developing in Nigeria is such that it can serve the whole of West Africa. So that also is a challenge. The fact that each country are not, developing at the same pace. That is a challenge. And of course, standardization is a moving target. Standards is usually described as a moving target. It does not end. Quality keeps moving. So as it moves, you have to make investments, you have to seek knowledge, you have to have discussions and ensure that you move with the times. Those are the major challenges, aside from, the financial, requirements that all of these, structures will need. And each nation has to do that with other competing needs of the nations.
You say that SON has been spearheading the affairs to see that this policy actually come to play. What challenges is the SON itself encountering?
The natural challenges.
Do you see other stakeholders cooperating?
No, well, we don't have a problem with stakeholder cooperation, because, like I told you from the beginning, standardization is stakeholder driven. The Standards Bureau is only a secretariat for the development and implementation of standards. You cannot develop standards for paper without, the people in the forestry being involved, without those who produce papers being involved, those who sell it. Of course, schools that use most of it. So it's not a problem, about getting people to participate. Maybe we can have more. In some other climes, to get people to participate is voluntary. In fact, you have to pay. But in Africa, we have to encourage them to come and participate. If we invite somebody to come for a technical committee meeting, one of the questions that may come is, who is going to pay my fare to come? But that does not happen in some developed economies. People pay to participate because they say, look, I have interest in this standard that is being developed, and I'm ready to pay to be a part of it. But in Africa, SON and other stakeholders that are involved have to provide the resources for people to participate. That is part of the challenge.
Oh, thank you very much for coming on board and sharing your thoughts with us. The topic has been Pan-African Quality Policy, and my guest has been Mr. Bola Fashina, Head Public Relations, Standard Organization of Nigeria. Thanks for your time.